Okay, so welcome to our 2023 ORCID US Community update portion of our annual meeting. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So starting with some introductions, we are your ORCID US Community staff at Lyrasis. If you don't already know us, I'm Sheila Rabin. I'm the Senior Strategist for Research Infrastructure Programs at Lyrasis. That includes our ORCID US Community. We also have a data site consortium for DOIs and our Institutional Repository Usage Statistics, or IRIS, program. We also have Paolo Guhilde, our strategist for the ORCID US Community. And I am very, very pleased and excited to introduce our newest team member, Kayla Ramett. She's our new program assistant for the ORCID US Community, and she started just a little over 2 weeks ago. And we've already seen a huge difference in what we've been able to accomplish just having Kayla on board. So welcome, Kayla. We're very excited to have you, and everyone will get to know Kayla more as time goes on. If we go to the next slide, I want to also introduce our ORCID engagement staff that are with us on the call today. Brian Minahan is our engagement lead for our consortium. So he's our main point of contact when we need to escalate tickets or give feedback to ORCID and that kind of thing. And then we also have special guest Shauna Sadler with us on the call today. Shauna is the engagement manager for outreach and partnerships at ORCID. And we'll be hearing a little bit more from Shauna in just a little bit about the global and national scope of ORCID adoption, especially when it comes to US federal funders, as we've all been kind of tracking on that. So in the next slide, we're going to look at kind of looking back over the last 5 years. We started this ORCID US Community Consortium in 2018, and that's when we reached our 100-member milestone. At that time, we had about 65 ORCID member API integrations with just over 72,000 ORCID IDs connected. Fast forward to this year, we reached our 200-member milestone, and the number of API integrations and ORCID IDs connected have grown exponentially. And just by looking at the map here, the red dots indicate member organizations within our US community, and you can see visually there the growth that we've seen over the 5 years, and we're hoping to continue to see that kind of growth going forward. Just looking at taking a moment to recognize the 25 organizations that joined our community just this year. As many of you know, most of our member organizations are universities, but we are starting to see more and more other types of organizations, funders like American Cancer Society and the American Institute for Cancer Research, other types of researcher associations, societies, and just other types of organizations. So very exciting, and welcome to our 25 new members this year. On the next slide, this is really just a snapshot of our community as a whole and where everyone is right now on their ORCID journey. So the red on this chart is reflective of the number of organizations in our community that are in the getting started with ORCID phase. So these organizations maybe haven't started using the API yet, or are just starting to make plans, and kind of more at the beginning stages. So you can see the majority of organizations in our community are in that getting started phase. So if that's you and your organization, you are not alone. The blue here is organizations that are a little bit further along. They've started using the ORCID API, been doing a good amount of outreach, and so they're kind of more along the middle of the path. And then the yellow indicates organizations that are really forging ahead. These are organizations that have multiple ORCID API integrations, lots of ORCID IDs connected, and are actively writing information to their researchers' ORCID records, which is great. But no matter where your organization is on this chart, you're in the right place. We're all on the same path, moving towards the same destination. We're just at different stages of that journey. And that's great because we can come together and help each other and share like we're going to do today. So on the next slide, just taking a look at a few more kind of stats and interesting growth that we've seen. This chart is showing the number of ORCID records that have been updated by our US community members year after year. So we started this consortium in 2018, and you can see that the number of ORCID records that have been updated by our members has gone up steadily each year, which is wonderful, and we hope to continue to see that growth there. On the next slide, we're going to look at, speaking of writing data to ORCID, just over 74,000 ORCID records have actually been updated with some sort of information that one of our members added to those ORCID records. Works is by far the most used piece of information that's getting added to ORCID records by our members, so over 1 million works there. And you can see from the chart that journal articles are the kind of top work that's getting added, but also conference presentations and other types of works. And then going down the list on the next slide, affiliations are the second top thing that organizations are writing to ORCID records, mostly employment affiliations, but also some education and a very small, relatively small in comparison, sliver of some of the other types of affiliations like distinctions and membership and service. And I'm including a screenshot here at the bottom of just the top 10 organizations that are actively adding affiliations to their researchers' ORCID records in terms of the number of affiliations that are being added. So it's definitely not a contest, but congratulations to these organizations for adding those affiliations to your researchers' ORCID records. And then let's see, on the next slide, just some highlights and kind of updates from this year. We started doing our free ORCID workshop for researchers quarterly, so 4 times a year, and that's open to everyone. And that has been really popular. Over the course of this year, we had about 1,400 registrants total across the 4 different webinars that we gave. So we're going to continue to offer this workshop, so keep an eye out for that. And we're also thinking about adding kind of a second part to the series that goes even more in depth with some additional tips and tricks for researchers. Community calls and webinars, these happen roughly once a month, and we're going to continue these. And it's going to be based on topics that are most voted in our annual survey. So if you haven't done the annual survey yet, we're going to put a link into the chat and go ahead and do that so that you can get your votes in for the topics you want to talk about over the coming year in 2024. And we've been lucky to present at several conferences this year now that things are kind of picking back up after the pandemic. And so if you have conferences in mind or want to collaborate with us on a presentation or something like that, just contact us and let us know. We'd be more than happy to work with you. So now I'm going to hand it over to Shauna to give more of a global and national ORCID adoption update, including what's going on with the US federal government right now.
Great. Thank you, Sheila. I really appreciate it. Next slide, please. Thanks for having me here, everybody. So I think first, just looking at the whole world, I think it's really exciting. It's a wonderful time. Persistent identifiers are being adopted globally. It's great. And, you know, certainly at ORCID, we've noticed, we have analyzed, and we now know that there are researchers with an ORCID ID in every country in the world. And it's just exciting. And we can also see across every subject area of study. So it's just wonderful. You'll see on this screen, I'm pointing to some of the multinational organizations who have subgroups that focus on science and research. And all of them are suggesting or encouraging the adoption of persistent identifiers. The G7 has a wonderful science communique they issue every year. The last few years, persistent identifiers have been part of their open science plan. Also the fair data principles, which ORCID is part of, the F1 part of the fair data principles. The G20 that was just recently held in India. Well, recently, sorry, July feels recent now. Time's going so fast. They're also part of the encouraging the adoption of open science and the use of persistent identifiers to enable transparency and access. I'll just quickly mention the, we're sharing the URLs to these documents in the chat. Right now, the G20 is transitioning the presidency from India to Brazil, and the link is broken at the moment because of this transition. But it's a great way to say, if they had issued a DOI to this document, then it wouldn't be broken. So, we're getting there. It's one thing to talk about the, encouraging the use of persistent identifiers. It'll be great when these organizations apply it and use them themselves, but we're getting there. We really are, I promise. And then we're also in communication with UNESCO. Oh, sorry, just quickly, Palabra. With UNESCO, this UNESCO recommendation on open science, no surprise that there is an encouragement to adopt persistent identifiers, and that we've been told to expect a new report from UNESCO on open science in the next week or two. I think the term outlook is used, the UNESCO outlook on open science. So just a heads up, something to look for. Next slide, please. So also on more of a global level, what we started to notice is that because of the countries that are part of these multinational organizations, the G7, the G20, a lot of the representatives go back to their home nation and have to start implementing what they've agreed to at their home country. And so we started to notice that national PID strategies were being developed in these countries. You see these 9 countries you see listed here. So there was a few of us at the RDA decided, well, why don't we create a community of practice so that we can talk to each other and help each other out, because it's a new thing. How do we do this? So we did form this National PID Strategies Interest Group. Last year we published this guide and checklist so that there are countries who are in the process of developing these national PID strategies. And then on the list on the right, you can see these are the common sections across the national PID strategies. Everyone here will probably notice that the US is not listed in this group here. So Paolo, next slide. The US is complicated. It's bigger, it has more funding, it has more researchers. So I don't know if it's possible to create a single national PID strategy for the US, because a lot of countries, like I'm Canadian, really easy. We're quite centralized, we're small, we can coordinate. US is so much bigger and much more complicated. So what we're seeing is the strategies from the White House and then the funding agencies. There's this new group that's being formed mostly from the universities and some of the smaller publishers to develop a national PID strategy. It's going to be organized by ORFG, so keep an eye out for that. Their goal is to engage the broader community of organizations that employ researchers. What they're expecting to do is to create a framework, and that this framework can be hopefully formalized into a US national standard that can be adopted by everybody in the very complicated US research community. So the work on this is expected to begin in Q1 of 24. And NIZO is going to be part of this. So NIZO members and non-members are welcome to participate. So keep an eye out for a call from ORFG. Sheila, I'll make sure I share it with you and your team, and you can disseminate it amongst your community. And just if you'd like to participate in the US National PID Strategy, there will be an opportunity for you to do so. All right, next slide, please. So Sheila mentioned, and I mentioned too, there are 2 key memos that came from the White House that affect, persistent identifiers and the adoption of them. So the first is the public access memo. So that really the spirit of it is that the public has paid taxes, that those taxes have been used and distributed through the federal agencies to develop research. And the output of that research should be able to be read by the people who provided that tax dollars for that research. And so the Nelson memo, and it's been shared in the chat, some of the key points relating to ORCID. So first, authors and co-authors are strongly encouraged to be identified by an identifier, and there is a criteria of who can provide such an identifier, and we're so happy that ORCID satisfies that list. So please encourage your researchers to get an ORCID ID, one, so they can be credited and clearly identified as the person who did this wonderful research. Second, really on the other side is that people who are reading the research, so more of the public or maybe fellow researchers, can clearly identify who this author is. So in the publication, they'll have their ORCID ID affiliated with their name. They can click on that ID, look at their ORCID record to see, where they're employed, their funding, the other publications, who else they're publishing with, just to get a better sense of who this researcher is and where this researcher is coming from. The idea is just to really help build the trust and transparency in science. And it's not just the US, this is global. It's part of those documentation from the G7 and G20. So everyone here who's at a university or a funder who's part of the ORCID consortium, an action that you can take to support your researchers to be ready for the public access memo is to make sure that your platforms that disseminate research, your repositories, your publication platforms, make sure that your authors can be identified by their ORCID ID. And then ideally, if the citation is not already in their ORCID record, that your platform can also write that data to their ORCID record. But IDing the researcher is primary. All right, next slide, please, Paolo. So the second topic, and this was a big one, is on research security. And thank you, Sheila, for providing. So research security is a hot topic, and again, certainly a topic at the G7 and G20. So all countries, not just the US, are implementing research security policies right now. They all sound a little different, but they're all nuanced to their countries. So some of the key points is that, again, the researcher needs to be uniquely identified by a identifier for researchers, and ORCID satisfies the list of requirements for the identifier for researchers. It is really important. Some researchers, a lot of them share the same name, so it is important that they're uniquely identified. In research security, it's important to be clear of who you are. Which leads to the second point. When you have the ORCID ID, you get that profile. Many of you have seen. This allows researchers to meet the expectation of disclosing their affiliations. So in the ORCID record, they can disclose their employer, where they've studied, if they've had any other professional activities or collaborations with other research organizations. Most of you know in an ORCID record, each line item, the visibility can be set to either public, trusted, or private, and that's at the researcher's discretion. They can change that setting at any time. But this allows the researchers to meet that criteria, that expectation of disclosure. So in a perfect world, the researcher would have their ORCID ID, fully populated, updated ORCID profile, and then they can be confident that they are disclosing their affiliations at all times. So then the last point for research security is really the White House and the federal agencies knowing that this is going to have a lot of work, additional work for the researchers. So then they turn their attention to the universities, the funders, and the publishers, and they're really saying you need to make sure that your systems are connected and that your infrastructure will do this work for the researchers, so the burden is not borne by only the researchers, right? So we have to reduce the administrative burden, but increase transparency. So really, you need to integrate your systems and to allow this data to be written to the ORCID record of the researchers so they can meet these expectations, but not have to, increase their administrative time. So Paolo, next slide. So some actions that you can do at your university or your organization. So first, obviously, make sure that your researchers have an ORCID ID. And then when it comes to their record, if really, especially for the universities, this is critical. If you can write the employment data to your ORCID record, that is probably the biggest, most useful thing you can do for your researchers. I've heard from lots of funding agencies that when they receive applications, the researcher has not put their employment data in correctly. They just identify more at the department level, the lab level, but they need the central organization name properly written. So if you can do that for your researchers, that would be a big help, and then also help their application for the funding proceed faster, because then the funder doesn't have to stop and fix the data. So that would be ideal. Some of the other data points that are required by research security and some of the new forms, also education. So if your university is keen, when somebody graduates, to write that data to their ORCID record, that would be fantastic and be useful. Many of you have systems, as Sheila mentioned, that are writing works, so that the publication, your list of publications should also be known to the organizations that you're applying for funding. Then they also want to see the funding data. So we are working with funders to write data to ORCID records. We're getting there. Their systems are tricky too, and that's a big infrastructure to configure, but we are getting there. And then last are research resources. And many of you who have researchers who work at some of the US labs or national facilities or user facilities, like Oak Ridge National Lab, what they'll do is when somebody applies to use that space, say for beam time, they include their ORCID ID. There's a peer review process. When they're awarded time, that data about the award time is written to their ORCID record. That data is actually going to be pre-populating a section of one of the common forms called the current pending support form. And they have to disclose where they've been getting some of their other support, not just financial support, but other support like facility time. So if you have research labs on your campus that are significant and you want to start writing this data to ORCID records, please let Sheila, Paolo, and Kayla know, and we'll help you start setting up your system to do so. Okay, next slide, please. So here's just a quick few examples of some of the this community who are writing to ORCID records. NYU, UC Davis, and Georgia State. Just a huge thank you. I just thought I'd show everybody what it looks like. And then next slide, please. And that is the end for me, but I'm going to be hosting a breakout room. And so if you'd like to talk about this further, please join my room.
Thank you, Shauna. So on this section, we're going to just talk about some reminders and looking at some of the member tools and services that are available to you all. So some reminders. One of the things that you already know is that the fee change will take effect in January 1st, 2024. So the fee structure will be more of a tiered fee structure. And then Kayla actually shared that link to you all as well. So if you have any questions with that, just email us. And some of the member tools that are available to you with your membership is that you have access to the member portal. So the member portal is where you can get your member reports, such as statistics, looking at what's going on with your integration. For example, if you already have one, looking at affiliation reports, so looking at the people that are affiliated with your organization are also available in the member portal. We want to remind you of some of our communication channels. We have a community forum that's by invitation to official contacts of ORCID at your organization. So if you are not part of the forum, let us know and we can include you to that. If you don't want to be part of the forum, but still want to be included with announcements and all those things, we always encourage everyone to subscribe to our listserv. The listserv is open to all of pretty much anyone that wants to know about ORCID and the ORCID US community, and that's available openly to everyone to subscribe to. We also have an affiliation manager. It does require one of your member API key, and the affiliation manager really writes employment data, education, and other affiliation data to ORCID record. So this is sort of like a way for you to push data, those affiliation data into ORCID records without having any development work. And we can talk more about this in the breakout session when we talk about writing data to ORCID. We can also do an R search for you. The R search is looking at who are the current employees and current students at your organization that may have or that have ORCID IDs. So we can run that search for you, and basically we'll send you a spreadsheet with all of that information. And one of the newest things that we have available, and we're really quite proud of this development, is the data visualization tool that was created in the past year. With this, it's really about looking at collaboration across the organization and across the globe. So looking at how your researchers are collaborating with perhaps a researcher in another country, so a country in Europe, a country in Asia, Latin America. So you can pull data for who are the collaborators across the globe, and you can create a map out of that. And that's a good way to kind of show the impact of your researcher and their research. And finally, we have some guides and resources. These are available to you, and we do have a lot of these things that you can take a look at and give you an idea on how to implement ORCID at your organization. or even do adaptation of like outreach resources and all of those things. Other services that we have, as you already know, we do a lot of one-on-one consultations with your organization as well. So if you have questions about ORCID, things you want to know more about ORCID, or just kind of trying to find out what are the next steps that would work for you as you implement ORCID, or maybe you've already have integrations and what can you do next? That's what we're here for. So let us know if you want to talk about those things. We're open to meetings. We do a lot of Zoom meetings with everyone. So just let us know. We also do a lot of presentations. Sheila kind of talked a little bit about the conferences that we have attended this year that we did presentations on, but we can also do presentations and workshops for your organization. So the workshop for researchers, for example, we can do that for your own organization. So if that's something that you want us to do, say, you want to gather all your researchers and to know more about ORCID and how they can populate their ORCID record and maintain their ORCID record, let us know and we can do that presentation for your organization. And finally, always contact us if you have any questions. You can contact us at orcidus@lyrasis.org. And some reminders as we close out the year. The newsletter came out yesterday. That's available for you all. Please take a look at it. Just a recap over the year and also what's going on with the ORCID US community. Some of the statistics as a community is available there as well. We have the annual member survey that will close out the end of this year, December 31st. Please fill that out. That will give us an idea of the kind of topics and activities that you would like us to do next year. And of course, we have a random coffee breaks that will start in February 2024. If you want to join the random coffee breaks and meet your colleagues across the ORCID US community, please sign up. We will have more information about this in January. All right. And that brings us to our community award winners. So we are very excited about this. So as you know, every year we do a community awards. This year, it's a little bit sort of like a longer eligibility period. We started from May 2022 to the end of November 2023. So now I guess we'll go ahead and congratulate our award recipients. All right, so the most helpful individual, basically somebody that helped a lot in the community. So the most helpful individual is Rebecca Wilsonbach, a research impact and information science librarian at University of Michigan. So Rebecca was nominated and selected for her work in the Research Impact Challenge and sharing those information with colleagues and also supporting her colleagues with outreach with ORCID.
All right, and the next category is organizational achievement. These are organizations that completed a custom ORCID API integration this year. So let's go ahead and see who those organizations are. So yes, we've got several here. We know that it takes a good amount of focus and collaboration and dedication to complete a custom ORCID API integration. So we really just want to recognize these organizations for that achievement. And if your organization is interested in doing a custom API integration, let us know. We're here to help you through that process. So congrats to these organizations.
All right, so one of the newest things that we are doing this year is recognizing the outreach effort of our members. So this year, we would like to recognize Emory University, Ohio University, and RTI International for their targeted outreach efforts in their organizations. In addition to that, we also would like to recognize other organizations that did outreach in their community. So these are just some of the organizations and the folks that are doing all of those work in their organizations. So thank you for sharing the information with ORCID to your community.
And last but certainly not least, we also want to recognize and give a big thank you to the people who volunteered to help us this year, whether it was presenting on a community call, presenting at a conference, or just, you know, basically sharing their expertise, insight, and knowledge on presentations or events that we organize through the ORCID US community. So thank you to all of these people that you're seeing on the slide. And we're doing something new this year that we're going to start doing every year, which is at our annual meeting, we're going to have our prize drawing for amongst the people that volunteered this year. So if you want to win a prize in the future, you can let us know and volunteer to present at one of our showcases or community calls or other webinars. So we're going to do a wheel of names spin and see which volunteer is going to win a prize. I think this one, let's see. Great, looks like it's Mick Chambers from Georgia State, correct?
That is correct, Georgia State.
Awesome. Yeah, so Mick was one of the people who presented at our last community showcase webinar. So congrats, Mick. And the prize for that is a $50 like Visa gift card. So if you want to volunteer, if you want to win a $50 gift card next year and anytime in the future, let us know. Okay, so that concludes our presentation portion.